Everybody, welcome back to humanities class. All right, this video is not like lecture notes. There's no assignment attached to it. Really, all I'm going to do in this video is just kind of give you my 2 cents, give you a little bit of feedback as to what I think about those kind of heavy, big journal questions that I asked you yesterday. So if you have not completed Journal 2 yet, I would encourage you to pause this right now, go back and view that material in that post, answer those, and then come back and watch this video. My reason for that is I'm going to kind of tell you what my thoughts are on this. And it's not to say that I'm right or, you know what I mean, have the perfect opinion or anything like that. I'm just kind of giving you my 2 cents. And obviously, like all humans have bias. And I've thought about these things because I'm asking you these questions. But I don't want to like sway your opinion. That's why I don't want you to watch this video and then go answer the journal, because in this class, I'm never going to ask you to like parrot my beliefs. I'm not asking you to just believe what Tylutki believes. I want you, my main goal is for you to think for yourself and to do that critical thinking and use your brain. Anyway, so here's where we'll get going with social media. I found this to be kind of a fascinating topic, and like I have a longer life perspective than you guys. So I've kind of watched the world change over time. And it has been, I think we really do live in a very interesting time in human history, even though it seems so chaotic and tumultuous, and that can be kind of unsettling. And I think there's a lot of like tension and animosity, a lot of people not liking each other. So that's not a great thing. But I do think, man, we live in a really interesting time all around because things are just changing so quick. So for the first question, it was, do you think that social media is a net positive or a net negative at the macro level, at the society-wide level? My take is I think it's a very nuanced thing. I do think it's a little bit of both because I can see where social media has connected people. It allows average people to have more of a voice and communicate more. But I honestly think that social media at the macro, at the really big nationwide level, is actually a huge net negative. I feel like that is the main factor, and more than anything, that is what's dividing the country and pushing us apart. I feel like also social media is now more than ever in American history, except for maybe around the Civil War, it's making Americans from one side of the spectrum look at the people on the other side as the enemy. Not just Americans you disagree with on a few issues, but now people are really starting to look at the other side as like the enemy and have this really like venomous animosity towards each other. So for that reason, if I had to pick one or the other, because I don't know that it's a clear-cut net positive or net negative, but I made you guys pick one. So if I had to pick one, I would say society-wise, it's a net negative. My answer for question two was, or the question two, I'm sorry, was at the micro level, at the individual level, like talking about for individual human beings, is social media a net positive or a net negative? Does it have more good things, more good attributes, or bad? For that, I really think it can depend on the individual. All right. So maybe that's a cop-out and not giving a great answer, but I think there are certain people that use it and it really adds a lot to their life. For example, if it's my sweet old Aunt Mary that has a Facebook account and she logs onto it once a week and she gets on there and she's not like arguing with people or doing any bantering or anything like that. She's not getting her blood pressure up and swearing at the screen or, anything. She's not even checking it from her mobile device. She gets on her actual like computer to do it. So she uses it in a different way, but she gets on there and catches up with family members, sends messages to people. She's looking at pictures of, nephews and nieces and stuff like that. I think for her, it's a net positive in her life. However, I think probably a majority of Americans, it's becoming a drag and a net negative. I specifically think that about your guys' age group, adolescents, because I see well, I did see you in class, not so much anymore, but I know even up to last year, and I don't think too much has changed since the COVID shutdown, necessarily social media or how it's being used. I see you guys just on it, compulsively checking. And that's not all of you. I'm not trying to do a blanket generalization there, but I do see a lot of kids that just compulsively check that. And I know I've seen the stats on it where it really increases like anxiety and depression rates. And I think it like you want to be accepted. And I think a lot of people, they put a lot of emphasis, a lot of their emotional well-being into that next tweet or that next post or the Instagram, picture they're putting up. And I think it puts a lot of pressure on you, and it overall is a net drag on your mood. I'll also say that my own personal experience was that. So maybe that taints it and makes me more biased because I don't think I could handle it quite right. At one time, this was about maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I had basically all the social media accounts at the time. I had a Facebook, a Twitter, an Instagram, a Snapchat. Those were the four that I'd use quite a bit. And I know for me personally, I compulsively checked them, and I always wanted to be a funny guy and send some little tweet up there and get a bunch of, favorites or retweets and stuff, and get some feedback from people, because that was love. It gives you that dopamine rush. 100% it did. Sometimes I would throw a tweet up there and it would really land, and a lot of people would, give me some feedback on it, and I'd see a buzz. I'd see everything go at Twitter, and that would make me feel good. But then there's a lot of other times where I'd throw something up there and I'd be checking it later and like, oh man, that didn't get much love. And it was, I don't know, giving me a certain weird anxiety. And I'm a very low anxiety person most of the time, and have been for most of my life. And I know like 5 years ago, we haven't done a unit on depression and anxiety yet. But I had never really been depressed or anxious in my whole life. And man, about 5-6 years ago, it hit me hard. And it just kind of rocked my world, and I felt like it came out of nowhere. Nothing bad had happened in my life. Nobody had died. I hadn't lost my job or had, legal troubles, nothing like that. But it just kind of crept up on me and came out of nowhere. And I don't think it was 100% all social media's fault, but I do think that impacted my mood in a negative way. Now, for me, I chose to make some big changes in my life at that time. I had a bunch of responsibilities, some other side jobs. I got out of that stuff. I started exercising more. I started spending more time with my kids. And another big thing I did was I deleted all of my social media accounts. I got off all of them. So if you're looking for Tylutki out there on any social media stuff and you find a Jared Tylutki account, well, guess what? It's some poser. It's not me, because I'm telling you, I don't have any. I went and erased all the accounts. And honestly, I didn't know at the time if I was going to come back to it. Because I know a lot of people, it's something like 90% of people that delete their Facebook account within a year, they're back on it. And I definitely thought that could have been me. But you know what? I noticed after doing that, my mood got better. I had less anxiety. And I thought, man, if this is like a net drag on my life, if it's a net positive, why the heck am I doing it? I don't have to. So why am I putting myself through that? Why am I compulsively checking it? Because I am was a person that would compulsively check. And every time I got bored, I'd get on there and get on one of the social media apps. So I've never really regretted that decision. And my mood, I've never really been super depressed or had a high level of anxiety since. So I feel like that's worked pretty good for me. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. All right, now part 2 of that journal, or questions 3 and 4, like the second half, that gets a little bit more controversial and political, tying into everything that's going on in the country today and how things are blowing up. Question 3 was essentially, was it okay to censor people on Twitter? And specifically, was it okay to ban President Trump because he just got booted off all of the main social media platforms? My answer to that is going to be a little bit complex. First of all, let me preface it with this. So you know where I'm coming from, because I do think just being open and honest with you guys on this is an important thing, because obviously whatever my political feelings are, that's going to affect how I teach and how I instruct things, especially for a class like humanities. So please know this, I am not associated or affiliated with either of the two political parties. I actually think both political parties are kind of destructive. I don't like the two-party system. It really frustrates me that I don't really agree with either party totally. And then every election cycle, I have to pick between a Republican or a Democrat. Don't like that. Also, as far as President Trump goes, I know a lot of people either passionately love him or they passionately hate him. I'm not in either of those categories. And I say that, and I'm really trying to be honest with you, not just trying to be a fence center that's not turning anybody off. On the one hand, I think a lot of his policy decisions, the actual things that he signed into law and executive orders, most of it, I think he did an okay job on. And I know that might be controversial too. If you disagree with me, that's totally fine. I'm not looking to argue with you on any of that. On the other hand, I think personally, he kind of disgusts me. On the one hand, he can be funny, and I get his appeal because, man, he is a hammer and everything is a nail. And if you are somebody that's like a real fiery, feisty political person, and your beliefs align with his, he is out there just smashing and throwing punches. And I could see where that would be very satisfying for somebody from that end of the political spectrum. But I also feel even like a lot of his supporters, and I have people in my family that are big pro-Trump people, even his most hardened supporters will say, man, he says a lot of dumb stuff too, or a lot of things that frustrate me that like, what is he doing with that? Also, I think just like in terms of who he is as a person, he kind of, I don't think he's somebody who I would want to hang out with, or he's not somebody who I would want my kids to look at as like a role model. So take that for what it's worth. Now, to the question, number 3, should he have been banned on social media? I tend to think no for what he said, with a caveat. I do think if somebody gets on there and they specifically say to go commit a crime or go do something illegal, well, I do think that crosses the line, and that the social media companies should like flag those posts or potentially ban a user that continually breaks those rules. Now, in the case of what President Trump said, 100% I agree with the people that say like he was saying inflammatory stuff. He was raising the temperature of that crowd. I also think he shouldn't have been doing it that way. He was making these claims to the crowd that marched over to the Capitol, and he was saying the election was stolen and rigged and all that. And that, of course, is getting the crowd all fired up. I'll also say that if you're going to make a claim like that, that's a really big claim, and you need to have really big, solid evidence to make claims like that. At least I think you should. And up to this point, he hasn't really produced that evidence. He's had his chance to go show that at court, and he hasn't done it. On the other hand, what he was saying there is an opinion. It's his opinion. It could be way off base, but man, I don't think the social media companies should be in the business of just discriminating and kicking out opinions they don't like. Now, it might be a far-fetched opinion. You might not agree with it at all, but it is that was an opinion. Now, granted, it was inflammatory, but he also said in that statement, go in peace. Peacefully march over there, like to that effect. He specifically said, be peaceful, and he never said anything about being violent. So here's where I'm coming around to. I always, as a general principle, and I apply this to people on both sides of the political spectrum, I always have a hard time blaming one person for another person's actions. Now, the exception to that might be is if you are in a position of power and you specifically like give an order, like go do violence, go riot. Well, okay, that's a different story. But he specifically said, be peaceful. And then to blame him for some idiot protesters that are his fan base, admittedly, going out there and breaking into the Capitol, I have a hard time blaming him for that. Now, I'll also say, I think the people that broke into the Capitol, just like anybody that's out there rioting or burning or looting, I think they should have consequences for those actions. I hope the police catch them. I hope they get prosecuted. That's not cool. They shouldn't have done that. I 100% would condemn it, like most of our politicians have condemned it. But I do think that it concerns me that you ban Trump under those circumstances, because then it makes me think, well, who's next? Where does this go from here? Now, maybe I've read too many bad sci-fi novels or something, and I'm looking at a dystopian future, and I might be getting carried away with that. But it does really concern me that maybe it doesn't stop with Trump. Maybe that's where it starts. And then I would not want to have a situation where social media companies are just banning any opinions that they disagree with politically. For question 4, where is it going to go from here? So let's say that Trump has filed lawsuits and he's trying to get reinstated back into Twitter. Who knows how that'll all play out? But I've heard quite a few other conservatives and big Trump fans also got purged or kicked out of Twitter really right around the same time, within the same day of it happening to Trump. That I find very concerning, because I could see it happening, and arguing on behalf of the social media companies, they are all private companies. And I do think that private companies should more or less be able to do what they want as long as they're not breaking the law. So that's okay. But just because you can do something doesn't mean you necessarily should. What if those bans hold up? What if they, and it's probably within their right to do it, they're private companies, what if they start censoring conservative sources and they drive, a lot of the most hardcore conservatives and Trump people off of Twitter, off of Facebook, etc. Well, what happens there? And I think it's a dangerous situation when you take people's voice away and you tell them to just shut up and go over here, because I feel like that's when things start to simmer and heat up too much. And then it worries me that it'll blow up and end up being 10 times worse when people feel like they've been marginalized and they're not important and nobody's listening to them. Whereas, there's so much nonsense and commotion on Twitter. I feel like, unless they're saying something criminal or directly like attacking or threatening somebody, let all the idiots talk. My thought has always been the cure to bad speech is more good speech, that you want to encourage more good speech and smart, intelligent, and rational comments, rather than just trying to ban the ones you don't like or the dumb stuff. And admittedly, there's a lot of dumb stuff on Twitter and social media, really on both sides of the political spectrum. Last little thought for question 4. So what will happen from here? Unfortunately, I kind of feel like probably those bans will be upheld and Trump's probably going to be off of it, and probably many conservatives will too. And I think what you're likely going to see, we'll see if this plays out this way or not, but I think conservatives and Trump followers are going to break and split, and they're going to go their own separate way. And they're going to think, well, we can never trust these social media companies again, so we're going to need our own platform. And I feel like it's almost going to be like how you see in like cable news networks, where you have Fox News that's really right wing, and then you have like CNN and MSNBC that are more like gravitate to the left wing. I feel like now there might be multiple platforms, and then once that happens, all of the discourse and discussion, because really social media is where free speech happens. That's where people express their opinions. Now you could have a situation where the liberals and the conservatives, both sides of the political spectrum, never even talk to each other. They're both isolated and they're in their own separate echo chambers. Remember, we talked about echo chambers. That's where you're just hearing what you want to hear. You're only hearing people that agree with you. And I don't think that's a good situation, because it's going to start decoupling America. And that's what I really worry, that we're going to have a split society more so than we already do. And you're going to have conservative social media and liberal social media, conservative cable TV and liberal. You could have conservative credit card companies and liberal credit card companies. And I feel like once we start getting a rift like that and having two separate whole like organizations for each side politically, that's probably bad news for most average Americans, especially average Americans that don't want to pick a side. And I'm one of them. I'm an independent. I voted for Republicans. I voted for Democrats. I don't want to have to pick a side. And like social media, I don't care that much about, but I worry that social media might be the beginning of a huge decoupling and rift that could be on the horizon. So hopefully I'm wrong in that, but those are my thoughts. That's what's going through my brain. If you disagree with me or you question anything I say, I encourage you to shoot me an email. I promise you I won't be mad. I won't like fire back at you or get mean or nasty or anything. I love kind of having some banter back and forth. This ideally, I'm posting it this way because I don't know the alternative to it, but I'm trying to have a discussion where I'm hearing what you guys say and then giving you my thoughts too. This would have been something, this journal entry and then my follow-up, and then ideally hearing more from you guys. That would have been a great class discussion day. But of course, because we're on remote learning and not in here face-to-face, didn't really work out. All right. Love you guys. Have a great day. I think that's all I got for you on this one. Take care.